Welcome to the Disability Advantage, learning to do business better from lived experience. This is the show where we get real about leadership, disability, and how to turn good intentions into actual impact. I'm Lesa Bradshaw, international speaker, diversity and disability consultant, and empowerment champion. I help organizations build disability confidence, which leads to big wins for your people and your business. In this podcast, expect straight talk, humor, practical ideas, and insights. Season 2, From Intention to Impact, is all about diving into stories, questions, interviews, and concepts that help you move from thinking to doing. I hope you enjoy the episode, and if it sparks something for you, please share it with your network.
You've recently launched a leadership disability confidence coaching service aimed at supporting psychological safety for line managers and leaders at all levels. Why is this so important?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think very often, disability confidence is driven by the diversity, equity, and inclusion agenda. And so many organizations expect their line managers and their leaders to create psychological safety for their employees, to disclose a disability, or to be able to speak openly about accessibility requirements. But in order to do this, our managers and our leaders need to feel comfortable in exploring how they can best understand and respond in a manner that addresses the support or access needs to the mutual benefit of the business and the employee or customer. So if managers don't feel safe to ask questions, to learn from people's lived experiences, and to lead on how to co-create a more accessible way of working or experiencing a product and service, then how effective can they be in creating this safe space? In my experience working with leaders at all levels and across all industries, in both developing and developed economies, there are 5 main confidence gaps that line managers or leadership often experience. The first thing is a fear of causing offence. So not being confident in asking certain types of questions, or how to ask questions that might feel a bit uncomfortable to them, or, am I allowed to ask it? Am I not allowed to ask it? And so they tend to prefer to avoid contact because then they don't put themselves in that situation of feeling awkward and uncomfortable. There's also the second confidence gap, which is really an over-focus on the compliance or medical expertise lens rather than the human conversation. So it almost feels like you have to be the expert on the type of disability and the medical condition rather than just having a human conversation that says, so what is disabling you and what can we do to try and remove those disabling barriers so that you can perform to the standards required. I also think it's stigma and unconscious bias. We don't know, we're not comfortable with, are we making assumptions? Is the decisions we're making based on truth or a stereotype? There's things like the performance stigmas of whether people with disabilities can actually perform in mainstream roles. So the reality is, because it isn't common practice, because we still are learning how to become disability confident, we tend to rely on our assumptions to inform capabilities. So we decide what different people with different types of disabilities can or can't do without really having the conversation with the individual. The next confidence gap is about invisible disabilities. With someone who has a visible disability, we can kind of see it and we feel a little bit more confident in what to do. But what about invisible disabilities or your more complex forms of neurodiversity? The question is, is it genuine, or are people just using it as an excuse not to perform or to get away with performance issues? So is it genuine or is it an excuse? That's sometimes a real fear that line managers go, how do we know? And lastly, how does this benefit our bottom line? So typically, it is going to require some sort of adjustment or something to be done differently, or a bit of a time investment by the line manager or the leader on how to know better how to remove barriers and do business with accessibility in mind. So often the question is, well, what is that return on investment for me? I'm so busy and the business has got so many things it has to worry about. This is only going to affect 1 or 2 people. So is it really worth my time? So we need to help line managers understand the return on investment conversation.
Why does focusing on line managers as opposed to DE&I leaders matter so much?
Efforts to bridge the disability confidence gaps must be practical. They must challenge people's assumptions, but they must be real and relevant if they're going to translate for a line manager or a leader into common practice behaviors. Disability confident leaders create safe and productive teams. And safe and productive teams drive performance and promote innovative thinking. So how do we help our line managers and leaders become confident in order to allow them to get this fantastic return on investment? I think it's important because, in short, it's your line managers and your leaders who are the gatekeepers in your business that translate intention into action. What I mean by this is that they are the ones who are making the hiring decisions. They are the ones who support employees who are struggling with performance or life issues. They are the ones to whom an employee is likely to turn to discuss a disability-related accessibility or support need. And they're also the ones who have the most to learn from lived experiences of people with disabilities, which can help them improve productivity, but also explore more innovations, more business processes that are flexible and are done in a slightly different way to the benefit of everyone. So,
where do you see the biggest confidence gap occurring with line managers?
Let me give you an example of how important they are. We have a skills academy that focuses on developing talent of people with disabilities for in-demand roles. So in other words, where there's a talent shortage, where there's a particular skill shortage, we will go and identify that skills need. We'll invest, we'll get sponsors, we'll get paid for programs that allow people with disabilities to build their talent. So we know that there's a demand for this talent in business. But our problem is that we have to get line managers to agree to take in this talent into their teams to give them proper workplace experience. So we've got the money, we've got the funding, we've got the skills program, and we know that the organization needs that talent. But the immediate pushback from line managers or leaders is concerns around, is it safe for them? Are they going to be able to perform? What are the risks in bringing them into the team? How much time investment is it going to take for me to actually support them? And I don't know about accessibility. So am I going to be a good leader to them, not being confident in what they need? And so the reality is we can't get these programs very easily off the ground because it's the line managers and the leaders' buy-in and proactive backing of these programs that we need in order for it to translate from a theory to a practice that benefits business. Now, I want to be very clear. Very often, it's not about any intentional discrimination. It's not because line managers or leaders don't want people with disabilities in their organization or that they're bad people. It's simply because they may not see the time investment return that justifies how much they might need to invest in getting the program off the ground. So, for example, we need to go and put a proper work plan in place, and we need to make sure that we remove barriers and that we motivate for, this barrier removal, which is going to take a time investment. And I don't really have time to do that. So that's the first thing. I've got more important things I need to worry about in business. The second thing is that they may fear non-performance of that person with a disability who they bring into the team. So because of a lot of our unconscious biases and our stigmas around disability, we're programmed to believe that people with disabilities cannot perform to the standards that we need in mainstream life. And so that assumption brings that fear of non-performance. It also might be because they believe that they are placing the individual at an unnecessary risk. So as an example, we might want to place somebody with epilepsy in a manufacturing environment. And the line manager might go, well, we can't do that because it's not safe for them. And we'll go, yes, but none of the triggers that may cause a seizure or trigger a fit, none of them are present in the working environment. So they've got the same risk as everybody else. No, but we can't take that risk for them. So very often, although we allow people without disabilities to face a certain degree of risk in business, we feel like we have to remove all risk for people with disabilities. Lastly, it could be a genuine human concern about offending someone or maybe feeling ill-equipped to provide the right support for a person with a disability. So I'm not ready yet to take on someone with a disability in my team because I don't feel confident in my abilities to lead them. And so very often it's those unspoken fears that underline hesitation from line managers rather than them not wanting people with disabilities to work for them because they have some form of discriminatory aversion towards them. So if your organization wants to build disability confidence into its culture, into its brand, into its products and services, then you need to recognize these real fears that line managers and leadership sometimes have, and you need to invest in building up their confidence and capabilities in order to allow them to get this fantastic opportunity to expand their leadership capabilities and make them future fit.
What does psychological safety for managers actually look like?
Let's start with understanding what psychological safety actually is. Basically, it's a shared belief in a team or in a workplace where it is okay to take interpersonal risks, to make mistakes, and to learn from each other. Are we creating this for our line managers and our leaders? Well, in reality, what we tend to do in business is we expose them to sporadic disability awareness training sessions that tend to stress what they should or shouldn't do or say, according to some sort of legislative requirement or some quota-driven objective, rather than actually supporting them in appreciating what disability confidence looks and feels like in practice. For this to happen, we need to create safe opportunities for line managers and leaders to be open and honest about their concerns and fears when the realities of their environment and work context seem to misalign to the needs of people with a disability. We also need to create conversations and connection points where line managers and leaders can soundboard their experiences and ask for guidance in a safe learning space, where mistakes can be openly discussed and explored, where assumptions can be challenged without fear of offending, and where questions can be asked without the fear of insensitive languaging or unintentional discriminatory statements. Okay, it's for this reason, this need to create these protected conversation and connection points, that I actually developed the one-on-one disability confidence coaching framework. Generally, it goes like this. I start with a webinar, and it's an honest, lived experience-led insight from a businesswoman with a disability who has first-hand stories to tell about the return of investment of a disability-confident economy. So I speak from personal experience, from professional experience, and it's a very relatable webinar. The whole point of this is it disrupts assumptions, it supports a bit of relatability and relevance, and most importantly, it ignites curiosity to explore disability-confident leadership in more detail. Following that webinar, I would typically encourage the employer to schedule 20, 30-minute coaching sessions. Okay, so they're in the diary and they're available to line managers and leaders. And they book on a first-come, first-served basis. These get booked up very quickly, way quicker than you may think. In fact, usually within the first hour of putting that offer on the table, those 20 sessions get booked. Why? Because line managers and leaders genuinely want to know how to do better in this area. So these sessions, when they happen, they are led by the content the line managers themselves bring to the conversation. So they would tell me exactly what they're stuck with or what they're uncertain about or what they're most curious about. And they tell it to me in the raw form. This is genuinely what my concerns are. And then I guide them drawing from real and relevant best practice examples or guidelines. So each session is conducted in confidence. It's done online or similar through Microsoft Teams or whichever platform the organization uses. And there are no specifics or details that are shared beyond that session. What I do though is after all the sessions are done, I will provide feedback to the employer on the emerging themes that indicate where more support or more adjustments or more education is needed. So it's a great form of insight for the business to understand what their line managers are really feeling about this agenda. And it's a great opportunity for line managers to have that safe, honest space to connect and to learn from their experiences.
Lesa, can you list 4 practical ways to build disability confident managers?
Okay, I think that there are 4 main practical ways to build disability confident leaders. The first thing is to equip them with the tools that they need to know. So these are things like guidelines, for example. This is a guideline. If someone discloses or declares a disability to you, these are the resources we've got available in our organization that will help navigate the process or the conversation. Here's access to our team of HR professionals who can guide you. This is a best practice example of how to design something with accessibility in mind. So that constant exposure of teaching them or giving them the tools that they need to learn to become disability confident, that's your first practical way. The second way is to normalize this conversation. So remember, disability confidence is not something that's separate to good leadership. It's actually the same thing. So we don't need targeted or specific information about disability outside of the realm of the normal stuff that we support our managers to do. So when we're talking about exposing managers to AI technology in the future, include accessible AI technology in that content. Where we're talking about normalizing operations safety standards for everybody in the organization, include accessible safety standards in that information. So normalize disability as part of everything that you do in business rather than a separate conversation or a separate item on the KPI. The third thing is support. Offering support to line managers, remembering that what might seem obvious to someone who comes from diversity, equity, and inclusion backgrounds is not necessarily obvious to a line manager who's dealing with explosive operations, in a manufacturing environment. So saying, if you're uncomfortable with having a conversation, we can support you. This is how we can provide that support. Very often I get called in because we've got someone in a team who's spoken around about a disability-related concern with their line manager, and perhaps the disability is new to that employee, so they haven't figured out all the solutions. And the line manager is going, well, I'm not the expert either, so I don't really know how to overcome this barrier. And I get called in to go, okay, well, let's have a conversation. Let's see what's disabling you. Let's see what other organizations have done. Let's see what's available to us. Because most of the time, the problems have been solved already. We just need to know what they look like. So offer that support in real time to your line managers and your leadership. And lastly, measure what matters. What I mean by that is don't go and say, well, how many people disclosed in our business over the last year? That's not a measure of success that you're becoming more disability confident as a culture. Rather, go and ask people like your line managers, did you feel supported in onboarding that individual with a disability? Ask the employee, how did you feel your manager handled that conversation with you? Or when we are designing products and services, do you feel exposed, and have we capacitated you in what accessible products and services look like so that as a manager you can make sure that that happens in our business? So it's about measuring what matters, not quantitatively, but qualitatively as well. So here's how I'd like to wrap up this podcast, really just by saying disability confidence is now a critical suitability factor for future-focused companies, and that's a reality. We're living in a dynamic world where people want to be recognized and treated and led as individuals. And disability confidence is an incredibly solid way to learn how to do this. So it's here to stay. It's definitely built into future-focused organizations, and it's definitely built into the KPIs of future fit leaders. We can only recognize and realize the benefits of disability confidence and its business benefits for everyone if it becomes common practice. And we can't expect it to become common practice if we don't build the disability confidence of our line managers and our leaders, who are the ones that translate good intentions into common practice. So let's create a space where it's safe to hone the skills as a standardized part of good leadership to the benefit of everybody. If you want to know more about my disability confidence coaching series, many of the support services that I have to help line managers and leadership feel confident in the future fit leadership capabilities, please contact me at www.lesabradshaw.com.